You're listening to the Buck Junkie Podcast. Yeehaw.
Hey, welcome back to the Buck Junkie Podcast. Hosted today, Malcom. Got Mark, Mikey, Jamie, Tyler on the board. And guys, we got a special guest on Buck Junkies today, Mr. John Gruchy from the Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks Division at our state biologist, right, John?
Yes, sir. I'm the private lands program coordinator for the state.
That is awesome. We're welcome to the Buck Junkies podcast today. We're glad to have you.
Man, yeah, glad to be here.
So we wanted to bring John in. This was Mark's topic this week. He came up with some ideas. Mark, you want to talk about what things we're probably going to get into with John?
So I figured since we got a well-known, educated biologist in the room, we're going to talk about how basically the evolution of deer management from when Mississippi opened their deer season. I know when it started, there really wasn't much of a management process ever. It was just kill deer from what I understand. So kind of want to go over things from what it was then and back in, I guess, 1905 to what it is now and what we've learned since we started doing it. So kind of a lot to cover, but if we got somebody in here with this bigger brain, let's use it.
Well, I know, John, you specialize in habitat.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what really we got interested in when we've got a little farm we're managing that you've come out and take a look at. Sure. And that's really what we're geared towards. Is we all love to hunt and shoot deer and all that, but we realize, and I think everybody should realize, that you got to take care of these properties. Whether it's a lease, you own it, you're on government land. It's up to us as hunters and outdoorsmen to take care of this land and the habitat that we can chase these animals and have fun doing it.
Well, that's absolutely true, and I think one thing people don't give hunters enough credit for is the legacy that we have in conservation and stewardship. So, you've got some history here, but in the 30s, the hunters all got together and said, look, we want to conserve the resource that we hold dear. We enjoy hunting and fishing and all those kinds of things. And so they passed federal legislation to voluntarily tax firearms and ammunition. They said, tax us. We want to support conservation. And that's what started all these state game and fish agencies. So, in the 30s, again, was when all that came about. Before that time, all the wildlife resources were just policed or managed by the county supervisors or the sheriff's departments in each county, locally. But after that, around 1933, when they started forming game and fish commissions, game and fish agencies in the states, that's when it really took off. And even now, we think about people view hunting and fishing and wildlife conservation differently. But even now, as much as you hear about tree huggers and all this kind of stuff, still the bulk of the funding for wildlife management is coming from hunters and fishermen. And we don't pat ourselves on the back enough for that.
Yeah, well, Mark kind of brought that up earlier about how much money that was brought in by hunters every year. And it was
exactly right.
Billions. It was crazy.
I want to say it was $1.2 billion.
That was just in the state of Mississippi.
Just in Mississippi. And there's some, Alabama says when they did the same kind of study, they were at $3 billion. I don't believe they really did. I think they just doubled Mississippi. I think we assume that's what they do every time. It's just double what we got. But the long and the short of it is that's even a conservative estimate. If you start thinking about multipliers, how much does that sausage biscuit bring into the economy when guys are stopping on the way to a duck hunt, all those kinds of things. Then not even counting all the jobs that are tied to hunting and fishing and the other big thing is ecosystem services. I mean, how much is clean water worth? How much is clean air worth? You know what I mean? And so there's some things that we can put a dollar amount on, some things we can't. How much is that experience with your son, first deer, first turkey, those kinds of things. And daughter, by the way, no offense there. Anyway, that's those are all important points.
Well, too, I mean, you think how much fuel we've used and stuff like that just putting in food plots.
This year, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that does not get accounted for that goes toward the hunting, like you said, that who knows what that dollar figure is.
That's right.
I guarantee it'd probably double it. We'd beat Alabama.
Yeah, for sure. We'd beat them.
Well, John, so how did you get involved? I guess give us a little backstory of how you got involved with
with game and fish, and wildlife management in general. Good question, man. Like, just like everybody, I'm sure sitting around the table grew up hunting and fishing. My dad was more of a small game guy. He grew up in Southwest Mississippi and was actually a quail hunter. And of course, or small game hunter. By the time I got to, big enough to do anything like that was kind of gone away, And so we squirrel hunted a little bit as kids, but my grandparents, my uncles, were all big deer hunters. So I, obviously started out deer hunting, but really what got me interested in his career was I started out thinking I wanted to be a a doctor, because when you're in high school and you look around, you're like, man, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to be rich, So, and if I looked at all the rich people, I knew they were doctors, lawyers, something like that. And I didn't like law, so I mean, maybe I'll do biology and do. So I majored in biology, and I came to find out that I was not doctor material. You know what I mean? But at the same time, my brother, who's 5 years younger than me, he went on a youth duck hunt at Knoxville Refuge, and I kind of took him on the hunt. I was his guide, or whatever you want to call it, the adult, chaperone or whatever. And I met 2 or 3 wildlife biologists that were volunteering on that duck hunt. And one of them was Dean Stewart, who was an extension guy at Mississippi State. And I just remember talking to him like, wait a minute, you get paid to do this? Like, what are we talking about here? And so, I was already a couple of years into a biology degree, and I just switched majors and went to Mississippi State. And then after that, I got a master's degree from the University of Tennessee. And it had always appealed to me to be a servant, public service and that kind of thing. So, state fish and game just really fell into place. And that's what, been with the agency now for a little more than 15 years. So it's been good. I've enjoyed a lot of it. What do they say? I think the saying is, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. Right. That ain't true. But it's been really good. Been really good. I've enjoyed most all of it.
So as a biologist, what's your primary duties?
Good question. So, we have a really diverse agency, and you can break it up obviously into 4 major divisions, law enforcement, which is not the, biology division. And then we have a non-game division, our museum of natural science. And then from there, it's fisheries and wildlife. So you can be a biologist in fisheries and do, a lot of the public water stuff. They also have some technical people that do other things anyway in fish division. And then in wildlife division, similar to fish, we kind of break it up into public lands and private lands. And so I've always been in the private lands division. And we primarily provide technical guidance. So we go out just like we do with you guys for a free service. Again, we're funded by excise tax on firearms and ammunition and hunting license sales. So for a free service, we'll go out, look at people's property, and make recommendations. We also manage the DMAT program, Deer Management Assistance Program. So we help analyze harvest data. We work with the turkey biologist, and we all keep, some amount of data collection. We're always going to do every division. And we assess, like right now, we've got a really good brood count going right now with wild turkey. We've got one of the better hatches we've had maybe in the last 20 years. We're in the midst of a really good turkey hatch. But those are the types of things we keep up with as biologists. So it's a lot of data analysis, a lot of public speaking. So you guys met us at a speaking event. COVID knocked that back. But, man, we used to do just a handful of biologists do 70 public presentations a year. So we're all the time doing that. Right now we got a bear trapping project going on. I'm not really involved in that, but they're putting radio collars on black bears. We've got a deer project. We doing research with Mississippi State University. We're partnering with them on a lot of stuff. We've got collars on deer. And you can go to the Deer University podcast. A lot of that stuff that they present, we actually help fund. So. Anyway, there's just a lot that goes into it. I heard somebody, y'all had Rob Hoff on, I think.
Yeah, we like Rob's a good guy.
Oh, yeah. And I've worked with him. I didn't know until this morning. I was researching, looking through all this stuff. I saw he was on there. I thought, oh, man, that's cool. But Rob's more of the kind of like a public land. You know what I mean? He's spending a lot of his time managing actual land. I'm more of the, what do they say, if you can't do, you teach or whatever. I'm more of the go and tell people, make advice, technical guidance as we call it. So,
see, I think a lot of people, don't even realize that we have this resource, at our fingertips. Really, before we went to it was a food plot seminar that our local DeSoto County Soil and Water Conservation Department hosted, and you come in. I think there's some other biologists with you, and y'all did like 2 presentations. One of them was on food plots. I think the other one we were talking. You could probably.
I think we had at least one CWD discussion or something, but those types of things.
And see, I didn't realize that we actually had biologists that you could get to come out and help you kind of get an understanding of what your land's doing and suggest. You're not going to do it for you. It's not like it's something that they come in and take over for somebody, but it is. It's more of a teaching or recommendations that you could give to somebody on what they could do to improve their land, which in turn is going to improve that hunting experience.
We would hope, yeah. So we'll go out for free again, ride the land, to make an assessment. Really, the biggest thing we can do for a lot of people is help them refine their goals and objectives. It's really pretty funny how many people I go out. I probably average 50 site visits a year, and back when I was really in the field more. I'm more of an administrator now, but when I was in the field more, I mean, I was doing 100 site visits a year. And how many people own a piece of land and really don't know exactly what they want to do with it? You know, you say, what do you like? Well, I don't know. I kind of like deer hunting, and I really, just want to make this place a safe haven for all wildlife. I'm like, well, what does that mean? I mean, I got to have more specific than that. Do you want to kill what's a big deer to you? And how much days do you spend turkey? Do you turkey hunt at all? All those kind of things. And basically just going through a process of trying to refine, like, what do you really want out of this land? And then once we figure that out, we go through and make an assessment of the land and say, look, you need to do some forest management, or you've got a lot of open land. We looked at that. You guys inherited a bunch of pasture, and it's like, man, what are we going to do? If you're not going to have cows on it, we got to do something, make this pasture work for us, And I think in y'all's case, we had really good forest land. 9 times out of 10, you do a site visit, it's like, ooh, we're going to, I hope you got a boat with this place because you didn't get no trees. I don't know what you would we got to talk to a forester here, and sometimes it'll be some heavy lifting on that. But the other thing we'll do is liaise with other groups like USDA and try to find cost share, try to find ways to fund habitat management. So we're all the time working with external partners on stuff like that. So it gets to be really diverse, and it's rewarding when you can take a property through the whole process, but at the same time, we're going to do it either way. We're going to always provide as much service as we can, regardless of the size of the property. So
made me realize how much I didn't know.
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, when first time you went down there, Mikey, and we got back and kind of looked over what all we had. I mean, we had no idea. I mean, we wasn't everybody. I guess growing up and being around just the average hunting club or whatever, all you know is put food plots in
the fall,
shoot a deer on them maybe, and don't go back.
You want something green to set over, and that's
Yeah.
I mean that's what a lot of people think.
that's right.
It's a lot more to it for sure.
Well, that was a question that I thought was interesting. You asked us first. Is like, do y'all want to see deer when you go hunting in your food plots in the fall during deer season, or do you want to think about what can attract deer to that property and hold them, bring them year round?
That's right. That's right. And then a lot of folks, what's a good hunt for you? Some people want to see 15 deer every time they go hunting, and you're like, man, look, maybe we can't see that many on this place. Or then sometimes you say, well, how many do you see on a hunt? And they'll say 30. All right, we're going to have to talk.
Yeah.
That's way too many. We got to get to
That was
work
kind of
on
discussion you had with us.
Yeah, like that's,
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess every piece of property you look at is different.
that's right. And the landscape is different. So if you get in, you guys are in Northwest Mississippi where we've got really good soil. Well, for the most part, there's good soil in pockets. But if you get down in deep South Mississippi, it's a totally different discussion. The sandy dirt, a lot of waxy leafed tree species. There's not as good a forage in a lot of cases. Or if you're anywhere near soybeans in your landscape, you start looking at the biology of the animal. How big of a home range do they have, and what kind of cover do they have available in that home range? That kind of thing. So
Way more than we ever thought about.
We're going to college now.
No, it's good. All good stuff. And when you think about it, it all makes sense, man. They just need the same thing we need, man. They want a place to stay, and they want something to eat. And then occasionally they need to find, be able to reproduce. So, it all comes down to those basic things.
I'm not going to tell him I seen 42 in one sitting last year.
Yeah. No, I mean, we did. We knew that the places that we hunt, it's a congregation. I mean, we've got a lot of deer in there, and there's probably way more mouse than there needs to be the land can support. So you saw what it did to our browse on our place. I mean, they're eating deer they're eating stuff that they probably don't want to.
That's
don't
right.
need to.
Out of need.
Well, and you got to think about, like I said, they got to be there year round. I tell people there's, there may be times in your property you look out and say, man, we got so much green stuff. And I'm like, well, what's going to happen in February? Are you going to go get a McDonald's? Because there ain't no, nothing. There's going to be nothing there. In the wintertime, there's going to be always bottlenecks. And that deer are adapted for those natural bottlenecks, right? They can, lose fat. They're actually pretty good at storing fat and then also at burning that fat in the nutritional stress periods, right? They've been wild deer here for a very long time, longer than any of us, obviously. And so they're good at doing certain things, but when we can keep them in balance with what's available in the habitat and what's available, the available numbers and all that, that really helps.
So when you go to a property, I know the answer to this question, but what are you looking for to decide like how many deer are, like if their population is too high or if it's about right, or is there something you're looking for when you hit that property?
Well, sure, man. I mean, so first off, I don't want to be the worst thing you can do is be what do you want? I want to say expert overconfidence or whatever. we don't know. I mean, I'm driving a property sometimes for an hour, and I have a snapshot in time. So, it's not like we just can drive in an hour and say, oh, you've absolutely got too many. But usually what we're dealing with is somewhere between way too many and not a whole lot. And what the first thing we want to do is start collecting data. Now, just a ride through and looking at browse and what specific plants the animals are eating, and then specifically we'll have indicator species like if they're eating red cedar or if they're eating red maple sweet gum at high amounts, things like that are lesser quality browse, then that's kind of an indicator. But also that's seasonal. So most of the time, like right now is a good time to look at browse because we're getting to the end of the summer, things are starting to harden off. And February is a good time to look at browse, but if you get to certain times of the year, like in April, it's hard to ride a property in April and say, well, they're eating too much because everything's green and pretty and it's all just flushed. So it really depends. But the biggest thing is if you're a hunter out there, you're a landowner, and you're wondering how many deer you got, man, start collecting data. Just keeping up with observations, how many deer we see in an average hunt through the year. Because what happens is you have a selective memory, right? We remember the 42 hunt and we remember the got skunked hunt, but we don't remember all the hunts.
The 10s and 8s.
That's right. That's right. So start keeping up with observation data is useful. Your cameras. How many of us don't have a camera now, man? They talk about something that's changed the world, having those game cameras. So trying to be a little more deliberate with how we deploy those game cameras and using them to try to keep track of the population. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do to collect data. And then, like we talked about you guys, you can look at body weights. But by age class. So you have to be able to assess the age of the deer by pulling the jawbones generally and looking at the wear and replacement of the mandible. That's how we, so if we got a mature doe and their weights are 10 pounds under the soil region average, that's another way we can tell, hey, look, man, they probably got too many. So all kinds of data we can collect and really make that assessment. So that initial ride is more like I think there's this going on. Then we got to start collecting data.
So backtracking a minute, you keep saying, and we've talked about browse. Explain what a lot of people might not know what we're talking about when you say, what do you?
Sure. Well, so in general, deer would be considered browsers as opposed to grazers. So a lot of folks, kind of one of the mistakes people will make sometimes is they'll say, well, the deer ain't got no grass to eat. And I specifically remember, talking to some older gentlemen when I was learning hunting. They was, oh, these deer need grass this and grass that. We kind of try to make them cows. Deer certainly will eat some grasses, but cows are really grazers, right? They have if you look at their mouth, they got a big, broad, fat mouth, and they can take big gulps of grass, and then they go back and chew their cud and all that. Deer actually have a little bitty narrow mouth, and they have a totally different, not totally different, but a slightly different dentition. So they're designed to eat more woody, coarse plants, and then they can that gives them the ability to eat more plants that might grow in the shade or in different diverse cover types. Whereas a cow, and specifically if you get some of these new fat breeds, they got to have not just grass, but a lot of pretty fine Bermuda grass, right? I mean, that's a very difficult thing to maintain. Any cattle farmer can tell you, that really high quality diet. Whereas deer are adapted to be able to eat a real diverse diet. So at any time of year, they can about find something to grab a hold of and eat. But they really specialize in kind of those woody plants and then also what we call forbs or broadleaf herbaceous plants. Now, again, they'll eat grass at certain times of the year, and, clearly we'll eat wheat, cereal grains, those kinds of things in the winter. They'll eat some native grasses a little bit, but in general, they're not going to eat things like Bermuda grass. They're going to specialize on things like clover, right?
So if you had to say top 5 things that great for deer to eat, what could you just give us?
Sure. Well, I'll give you 5. Let's see. I'll break it up by forages. So I'll break it up by the native plants. And then I'll break it up with the forages, planted forages. So I'd say top.
I'm writing
5,
this down.
Yeah. So top 5 native forages, without question, they're going to eat smilax. If you're familiar with the greenbrier, now there is a couple of different species of greenbrier, and there are a few that they do not eat. So the really, really coarse and waxy ones that have the really, really sharp stickers, like lance leaf greenbrier, they won't eat that too well. But most of your greenbriers, that's going to be one of the first things we look at when we get out on a property. We're going to say, man, they're really just eating, they're hammering the greenbrier, but they're not eating X, some of the bad stuff. And so, greenbrier is one that I'd immediately go to right off the bat. They're always going to kind of eat greenbrier. Next, you start getting into the broadleaf plants, and there's a few that they're always going to eat. Believe it or not, they eat like prickly lettuce. So if a plant has spines, people look at it and go, well, they don't want to eat that. Well, You think about the adaptation of plants; they probably adapted to grow them spines because they were
things
good
were
to
eating
eat. Yeah, things was eating them. You know, they're good to eat. So believe it or not, they'll eat blackberry. Believe it or not, they'll eat poison ivy. You think about it, why is poison ivy? Because it tastes good. You know, things were eating it. So you know, they'll eat the stew out of poison ivy, but poke salad, which has some toxicity, they'll actually eat the tar out of that. They eat ragweed. Is a really good native browse, and we'll almost always see them, especially in the spring, eating ragweed and bidens. You know, they'll eat some of the wildflowers that you guys are familiar with. And then, of course, from the cultivated plant side of things, I mean, there's nothing a deer wants to eat more than a soybean. Everybody knows that, right? I mean,
No
that's
doubt.
pretty common. You know,
Yeah, they don't make it very long.
No. That's just a fact. I mean, there's some things that are, but then, you know, after that, if you get into, that's just what I would call what is called a summer annual. If you get into the perennial forages, we don't grow it much around here, but they'll absolutely eat the tar out of alfalfa. They will eat your clovers really well. In the summertime, you know, they're going to eat joint vetch really well. The cereal grains, which really carry a lot of our production through the winter, so wheat, oats, cereal, rye, those aren't really highly preferred. They just make a lot at a certain time of the year when the deer need groceries. So if they're left to their own devices, they're not going to eat a whole lot of those grasses if they've got an abundance of other things to eat. But deer diet is really funky, right? So people all the time, and I see this all the time with people that want to feed, you know, bagged feed in a feeder. They'll say, well, I need this 40% protein, whatever stuff. And, and I don't think there's really a 40%, but there's high protein stuff that they'll want to put out. But at the end of the day, deer are going to have to balance their diet. They're just like us. You know, my favorite food in the whole entire world is tomato sandwich. When the tomatoes come in, you know what I'm talking about, man? I'd rather eat a tomato sandwich on the first 2 pieces of white bread. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But if I eat 3 of those in a day, my stomach says,
yeah, we got to go somewhere else.
We're going to have to change gears. You know, can't have 3 of them, guy. So at the end of the day, that's what happens to deer too. So they can get too much of a good thing. So here we are talking about the good things they need to eat, but there's a whole lot of other things in the environment that deer also eat. And what they're doing is balancing out that diet. They're trying to get some roughage. They're trying to get some different, and they do have a little bit of nutritional wisdom. It's not like they'll go in and say, well, that wasn't enough protein, you know, they got to get something different. But at the, they're not reading the back of the ingredient label.
They ain't got the label.
Ain't got the labels. But at the end of the day, they do have nutritional wisdom for things like sodium, and they can avoid things like sulfur. They know, just like us, when you eat something that don't taste good, they won't spit it out. You know, high sulfur foods, they will avoid high lignin, just a real tough stuff. It gives them post-ingestive consequences. So they do have some really neat selection mechanisms for stuff that they eat. It's really cool. I mean, when you really get to looking at it.
So where does your acorns and your persimmons and your muscadines and all that fall in?
Yeah, I left that out. So we would put that, so you can put forages, I guess, or deer foods into broad categories. And I mainly just talked about browse or forage, I guess you might say, with the ones that I just talked about. Another broad category would be mast, and that's what you're talking about. So you've got soft mast, which is your fruits, persimmons and whatnot, and then hard mast, which is acorns, and pecans and, a whole lot of other stuff. So deer can live without mast, but in some areas, deer are entirely mast dependent. So if you go into the Appalachians in West Virginia and those areas of the world, almost an entirely mast dependent herd. Big acorn crop, they eat a bunch of acorns, and then they have to just tough it out through the winter because it's all those closed canopy, hardwood type forest. So in Mississippi, we have a really diverse forest community, and we absolutely can see deer persist and be very successful in the absence of acorns, right? But where they have acorns, they like them, and
we've noticed.
Oh yeah, man, yeah.
Especially the yellow ones, huh?
Yeah. He got you there. No, game warden joke. No, anyway. So there are some preference for different acorns, but that's really very difficult to assess for a lot of reasons, and it almost isn't worthwhile to study on because we have such variable acorn availability. Right, so one year we'll have a boom in white oak, and then one year we'll have a boom in red oak. Right now we should have a really good soft mass. So you were talking about persimmons, man. The plum crop in June was phenomenal, as many plums as I've ever seen. Blackberries look good. We had elderberries. We had mulberry back in May. The elderberries are out right now. They look really good. I imagine we're going to have persimmon. Now, I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to it. Honey locust right now, the bean trees are loaded. I mean, I'm talking about mass looks good.
Deer like those?
Oh yeah. They have you ever really smelled one when they're ripe, man? They've got a very unique.
Yeah, we've got one or two on the property out there, and you just take it and you break it. It's almost got like a slimy texture to it, and it's got I don't know how to describe the smell of it.
It's unique. There's not hardly anything that really smells just like the honey locust pods, but they absolutely will eat those. But that's one of those things that makes a whole lot and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's none of those things. So mast is good. It's great. If you've got acorn trees, good. If we're managing a forest, I sure as heck ain't going to cut my hardwood out. You know what I mean? I want to try to keep acorn trees. But mast is not what carries the deer. You know, it's a really good thing to have, and we want to capitalize it on where we got it. But what's carrying them is that summer browse, that summer forage, and then hopefully we've got some winter forages as part of a diverse habitat management plan, you know, be able to carry them.
So what are some of the ways that as a landowner or someone hunting a tract that you could improve your natural forage? Like with the stuff you're talking about, that greenbrier, all the things like that. What are some ways that we can do a better job at ensuring deer have that?
Sure, man. There's a couple of ways. One of the I guess the father of wildlife management, if you will, his name's Otto Leopold. He says the tools of wildlife management are the match, the axe, the plow, the cow, and the gun. The 5 tools. And he wasn't. It was back in the 30s. He would have said the sprayer if he had.
If he'd have known.
Spray, yeah. But that's for sure. Those are going to be your tools. You know. So timber harvest. The first thing we're doing is looking at in the east. In the eastern United States, wildlife biologists go to forestry school. In the west, they go to cow school. They go to grazing school, right? So one of the first things we're looking at in the east is what kind of forest types we have and what type of forest management opportunities we had. So like I say, in y'all's place, it was really a neat place because you had this is kind of rare, but you guys had some really high quality hardwood. And so you start to look at that and say, you know, most people don't have that. You start to look at that and say, well, you know, hardwood's great. And like I just got through telling you, know, mast is a really good thing, but we got to be able to make some summer forage too. So in the absence of timber harvest, you know, we can still do forest management. And you can do things like chainsaw work. You can do things like injection, all those types of things. But they're really, you know, to be deliberate with that and be part of a forest management plan would be the goal. Then secondarily, we start looking at field management. So most people, when they see a field, they think that's just an opportunity for a food plot. But like in y'all's case, y'all have a bunch of field. There's no way you could plant all that. No. And so you start to look at it and say, man, what are we going to do with all this open land? And deer don't just live by their stomachs. You know, they've got to have cover for fawning. And particularly in the eastern United States, we've seen the introduction of coyotes. You know, they're not a native predator to this area of the world. And they've really worked on deer in some areas, especially where we don't have that adequate fawning cover. Now, in y'all's case, y'all need some hungry coyotes because y'all got a lot of deer. But in a lot of cases where they're worried about fawning cover, worried about deer density, you got to manage that cover. And one of the great ways to do that is with managing your fields. And you can do that by burning them in the winter, you know, trying to defer mowing until different times of year, not mowing during the fawning season and all that kind of thing. And in general, you know, we try to kill a lot of the non-native plants with herbicides. So we'll go and take like the fescue or the kudzu out if we can, those kinds of things, and try to manage that native plant community.
And we first started talking all this, the word burn. Yeah. It's like a bad word, you know. It's not, you don't want to burn nothing. That sounds horrible. But now that, like, all of us have learned so much about the burning deal and the hack and squirt and all that, it's definitely different.
Oh, yeah. Burning's just good old-fashioned fun, man. I mean, you know, it's just...
Well, hang out.
We might find out here in about 2 hours.
We're about to go do that.
No, man, yeah. So you can, you know, there's... burning is a great habitat. I could talk all day about burning. I don't want to get off on that. But that's my... That's a really high quality... Both field and forest management, you know, is burning. Controlling invasive plants. We already talked about that. Before I came in here, you know, we were talking about controlling invasive animals. You know, some people have a wild hog problem, and that's another big habitat management issue. You got to get some of those mouths off. And then the last one, you know, we talked about Leopold's gun, getting that deer density right. You know, there can be an issue where, you know, deer is kind of a keystone animal in a lot of respects. And so if they are over dense, they are, you know, kind of messing up habitat, if you will, for some of these other animals, particularly ground nesting birds like turkeys. You can have too many deer for a certain area.
So, I mean, we covered a lot as far as, you know, taking care of the habitat, like you say. Would you say, in your personal opinion, and since hunting started in Mississippi back in the early 1900s, are we trending in the right direction of taking care of the habitat and taking care of the herd?
That is a huge question. So I'll tell you what I say when I do public presentations. We've changed a lot. So my granddaddy's generation, or my my great granddaddy, whatever. I'm 43 years old, so my granddaddy's generation, great granddaddy's generation, they were in restocking mode. They were in, we don't have any deer, and so we've got to go. And they restocked animals. Most of them came from right here in the state, and I don't want to get off on a sidetrack on this, but they did get some animals from other states to restock the deer herd. Not many. Most of them came from Leaf River Management Area, believe it or not. But so they were in restocking mode. My dad's generation of biologists, so the biologists that hired me on, trained me, they were in oh no mode. We got too many of some of these animals, right? So we saw this boom and then kind of a topping out and maybe a little bit of a decline in some of these animals. So with deer, with white-tailed deer, we really saw this mid-90s was really the peak, we believe, of our deer herd. We just had so many deer in the mid-90s. That was kind of the good old days of deer hunting. And we saw similarly turkeys, kind of the late or early 2000s, turkey populations really kind of peaked in a lot of places. Some of that had to do, we believe, we don't know for sure, with the whole restocking effort, and we kind of reached that pinnacle, how many, and maybe even shot a little too far, had too much. And so now that generation is kind of in the, we had too many deer, and so they were more like, look, we got to burn powder. And so my, dad's generation, the guys that I replaced, they're used to telling everybody, look, you guys need to wear them out. We're going to have to go in there and just really start killing them. Well, now with our generation of biologists, what we're seeing is it's a very spotty deer herd, a very spotty turkey herd. We've gotten to the point now to where the places with really good habitat, the places with different hunting styles and all are sustaining high numbers. But I can't broad stroke and say that's how it is over the whole state, right? So a good example, we're in northwest Mississippi right now. You can go to places in Marshall County where there are so many deer, you can't throw a dead cat in the woods without hitting one. But you can go to places 4 miles, 5 miles away, and they ain't got a deer to be had, And I don't believe that's necessarily a disease issue. Now, we have had some big blue tongue outbreaks, but a lot of it is local habitat stuff. So
a lot of it's probably construction development too, everywhere too. They got a lot, huge impact.
Development, and then also, we've had in Mississippi, we don't think about this, but we've had a lot of afforestation. So we've changed the way we use the land. Now the bobwhite knows this because my dad's generation, they didn't have the bobwhite. They watched that. So we used to use the land a certain way. We were a little inefficient with it, right? Which was great for the bobwhite. When we had this inefficient farming and all that, good for the bobwhite. When we got better, or we changed the way we used the land, got better at farming, we changed the way that we used cattle production. They used to not have fescue, inorganic fertilizers, all that kind of stuff. It changed the way we used the land, and that was not the best for bobwhites. Well, now we're looking at a situation where we've got afforestation. We've got more pine timber in Mississippi than we probably ever have. And please don't think I'm saying pine timber is bad for deer, not at all. But it's just changed the way that the land is being used, and our deer herds are just kind of, there's a lag always in the way they respond to all that with deer and turkey. So we've got to kind of, like we started the episode with, kind of start taking ownership of some of this stuff and say, look, there's forest management to be had that's both profitable land use, and we can have, high quality habitat for deer and turkey. And a lot of landowners, we're really starting to see, you mentioned development. So we're actually seeing now a lot of recreational land ownership. People are, particularly, I guess, the Gen Xers and boomers are starting to retire husband and wife, and they want to get 100 acres out in the, wherever, and the man or the woman, either one wants to hunt something, and and so, we're starting to see, I guess, a whole lot of interest in managing the land, and it's been good. It's been good to see, but we got to kind of carry that through. How can we? So that's kind of your evolution of hunting. That was a long way of saying that it's changed so much that but it's stayed the same in a lot of ways. Still the biology of the animal is the same, and still the fact that human beings are going to have to be able to profitably use the land. We just got a lot more of us, right, and we changed the way that how the land is profitable. So we just kind of got to adapt to all that.
Well, I know everybody's property is different, and everybody's population is different and things like that. But and from your perspective of it, what as far as bedding, food, cover, things like that on property percentage wise, what would be ideal for your property, and in that same aspect, what would you want your ratio at?
Sure. That's a real good question. The problem, so everybody likes real specific numbers, and I don't mean to be
we ain't looking for specific.
No,
just
no.
Broad strokes.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say. I would say that it depends. And funny story, biologist a long time ago when I was in school said, any good biologist is going to answer every question with, well, it depends, So it depends. But if I'm in deep South Mississippi in a very piney landscape, just solid, unmanaged pine plantation-y type stuff, I mean, it's going to be undoubtable in my mind that food is going to be limiting, right? We're not going to have enough food. Or in some cases, fawning cover, whatnot. If we get in the really poor soil, they have a hard time growing fawning cover. It's really bad off. But if we're in northwest Mississippi and we have, I try to think about stuff in kind of, for deer, 2,000-acre landscapes. So, a buck home range, doe home range is between, 150 to 300 acres roughly. It varies, buck home range, highly variable, but we'll say between 500 and 1,000 acres. Now, we got some that's 2,000 acres and some that don't leave a 300-acre area, but in general, we'll say 500 to 1,000. So even though the property that I'm looking at may be 200 acres, I'm kind of looking at a 2,000-acre landscape around that.
So you need to look at the property around you and kind of set your goals to what's around you. Even if you only own 200 or 100 acres, you need to look at the broad picture of what everybody else is.
So
that's right.
That brings up a good question to me. So what do you tell somebody that their neighbors aren't participating? They're doing it. You can't expect everybody.
Oh, that's right.
Not everybody's got 2,000 acres, and you can't expect your neighbors around you to be on the same principles. But to not get discouraged when you do have a smaller tract, what would be some advice to tell somebody why they should think about doing these practices?
Yeah. So that's a good question. One of the things and this is becoming increasingly common, if you look at our average ownership patterns, I guess for DMAP specifically, we had bigger tracts, and now those tracts are starting to break up. It's just a natural process, I guess, of land ownership and having a bigger populations and all that. So average tract size is going down. It becomes that much more important in my mind, though, too, to try to talk to the neighbors. It's remarkable to me how many people just assume the neighbors aren't doing right. So it's funny, I've actually done a site visit with a guy, and then a year or two later, he says, oh, my neighbor's a jerk. He shoots everything that walks, rah, rah, rah. And then I do a site visit with a neighbor independently like 2 years later, and he's like, that guy down there, he's a jerk. I hear all these shots. He's shooting everything. So I would say, first off, let's try to have honest dialogue and open that up. Secondly, you are exactly correct. There's always going to be, and what I see a lot of is absentee land ownership. You're going to have somebody that owns the land that lives in Colorado, wherever, exactly. And they don't come here but once a year or whatever.
That's
and
the best neighbors.
Yeah.
Well, they got 10 people hunting on it.
I was about to say, unless they got a nephew or, they lease it out to the guys at the welding shop. No offense to the guys at the welding shop. We have a lot of figures of speech we say. I don't mean to be oppressive of anybody. But anyway, they lease it out to folks, and then they don't, maybe they actually, hunt it hard or all those kinds of things. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I would say that from a habitat standpoint, it's actually sometimes that's less frustrating, I would imagine, than the deer harvest side of things. So where we really see the conflicts is when people say, well, we've been letting this, man, we got a pretty 4-year-old 8-point. Man, if he could get to 5. And then the neighbor shoots it and they get upset. So I guess the long and the short of it is that that's always going to be a thing. But if you don't try, what's the alternative? What's the other option? And so I would encourage you, I guess, first to have an actual open dialogue with the neighbors, because even if you aren't on the exact same page, it's always good to have at least a kind of friendly relationship with the neighbors. If for no other reason, trespass, vandalism, those kind of things, you ain't going to be there all the time. And so being able to have a friendly neighbor, really all sides friendly at least, but if you can just have one or two to where you can get together and be on the same page, if you can put together 500 acres easy, maybe 1,000 would be great. I've seen people have big success on a couple hundred acres kind of together in a co-op of small landowners. So you can do, you don't have to have everybody on the same page, but it would be good if you can, try to tie together a couple hundred acres.
I tell you, just from what I've seen this year and what we've learned, plant vetch on your little property.
Yeah.
Because they're going to stay there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we talked about that with Mikey earlier. The dang American Joint Vetch. That's that's kind of a go-to summer food plot on the smaller properties. Man, they're really they'll get them in there. But
most people don't know what it is, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we've never planted it. I mean,
yeah. Well, it's hard to come by in year to year. It just depends, and availability was bad this year, and it is kind of a little pricey, but At the same time, man, it's going to grow in a variety of soils. American Joint Vetch, it's a summer annual legume. You can just Google, American Joint Vetch. Summer annual legume makes a heck of a lot of production. It's high protein, high preference. The deer eat the tar out of it. If you put a cage around it, you'll see, it's quite a bit of difference. Now, in terms of holding the deer, you can get them. They have real seasonal movements. This is the fun time when the bucks are in bachelor groups, and you can get the camera pictures of 5 or 6 of them together. Those are going to break up, and they're going to move all around. They're going to do what bucks do. Yep. And about December, when you really hunt them, they're going to be running around. But, hopefully you'll get as many as you lose, in terms of buck movement. But at the same time, it is nice to be able to have some that's one of those practices, planting joint vetch, things like that, where it's fun because you get to see something, pretty quick.
See the work and see the payoff.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue to take it into everybody's getting ready to start thinking about these fall food plots, John.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some things in Mississippi, what you could do if you have, some land that you're going to put in a food plot. It may have been a food plot or it may be new land, but maybe give us some ideas and some things we can plan.
Best bang for your buck.
Yeah, everybody's on budget this year. So
for sure. Yeah, and I actually thought about doing an article on that. I ran some numbers on the increases. Actually, herbicides were the biggest increase.
Wow.
Yeah, herbicides have gone up.
Even regular Roundup.
Yeah, Roundup.
Man.
And then availability, that's if you can get it. So herbicide is a big deal right now. The other thing, obviously, fertilizer. But if you look, it's really only up about 20% over last year. So it's not good, but it's not the end of the world on fertilizer. The biggest thing I would tell you, if you're just prepping now for planting, you need to go ahead and soil test so you don't waste money, right? We want to look and see what does our dirt need, be able to be kind of prescriptive, so how much actually, nitrogen, potassium, and potash do I need on this particular piece of land so that I'm not wasting any by putting out, we talked about in that seminar, you can waste fertilizer and you can put too much, it's still a chemical. And you can put too much fertilizer in one spot. So first and foremost would be amending your soil and trying to do that the best way you can. Now I noticed you guys had done some experimentation with that buffalo system. Verdict's still out on me now. I ain't gonna shade it yet. I gotta be able to see it. But I will be interested in Mississippi's climate and soils because we do have very productive soils in some areas of the state. And so the best way for you to take advantage of productive dirt is with really good annual plantings and good, manage your soil fertility, get those annuals in so that they can make a lot of forage fast. And annuals are things that for the winter is going to be things like wheat, oats, crimson clover, winter peas. But man, if you got a higher deer density, winter peas are going to get wiped out, right away. The brassicas are more of things that, like your rape, and there's just a ton of brassicas anyway. They are really more for poor sites. They'll grow anywhere, on a sidewalk or whatever, but you can mix those in for a little bit of diversity. When we get into the perennials, to me, that's going to be, so annuals go to me in two different spots. They're going to be in your worst dirt, right? Because you can't hardly keep a planting through the summer in the really bad dirt. It just won't hold a summer planting. And then in your really, really, really good dirt, I like to have an annual because I can't keep the weeds out in the summer. You know what I mean? I want to be able to replant and stuff like that in my really good dirt. But in your well-drained, kind of mid-quality dirt, I'd say like class 3s and stuff dirt, I love a perennial clover, especially if I like to turkey hunt, right? If you're a turkey hunter and a deer hunter, it's good to have some things like Durana, and you can mix in Durana and chicory and have like a perennial mixture or a couple of different clovers. But for the most part, for the people planting right now, your standard deer plot, best thing you can do is amend your soil, get your annuals in and plant them properly. So make sure you put the seed at the right depth. You've got wheat and oats, they're going to be a little bit deeper than your clovers, which is going to be, so generally, we'll work the dirt up, broadcast the wheat and oats, work that in, and then Cultipack or something and top sow the clovers. And, the Mississippi had a mix forever, that Mississippi Complete mix, which is pretty good. And it's just wheat and oats, crimson clover, and arrowleaf, and it kind of has that staggered production. Nothing wrong with that. Good wheelhouse planting. I'm seeing a lot of stuff now with Berseem and the Balanza. Balanza fixation stuff. Those are similar kind of mix, perfectly good. All that kind of stuff, very good. It's funny to me. I did a lot of this in grad school, which was like 20 years ago now, and I'm getting to the point now where I'm like too old for these new plants. They come out with new stuff, and I'm not another new thing. I got to learn that again. But man, those annual plantings, they're going to be the wheelhouse stuff. We tend to stay away from ryegrass primarily, and that's annual ryegrass that everybody's going to be familiar with. primarily because not necessarily because deer don't eat it, but because it tends to be invasive. And once you have it in a place, it's hard to get rid of it if you let it go to seed. So again, we kind of try to stay away from that. But outside of that, most of your commercially available forages for winter plots are pretty good.
I've seen, some of the cheaper ones have a lot of that ryegrass in them.
Just a filler. It's a cheap
I
filler.
think so.
Well, and it'll come up on the sidewalk. Like, so, if you're selling seed for a living, you want something that's going to come. You don't know how these guys are going to prepare
That's
their dirt. You don't
Yeah.
know where they're going. So I feel for the seed man. I'm not trying to, throw too much on them. But at the same time, if you're gonna be the one that's going to go to the extra effort, work your dirt, do all that kind of stuff, you really ought to kind of look at your forages and see what.
Should you worry about the cages on the fall plots to kind of see what your browse is like, or is it?
Absolutely. So, man, you can do that. That's one of those things that gets overlooked all the time. And it is cool, man. Kind of one of those rewarding things, like you say. One of the worst things is in high deer density, I'll go out and look and see the dirt and poop. There ain't nothing out in this plot, but the seed didn't come up. Well, I don't know. Maybe it did come up. It tried to come up.
We saw that this year.
Yeah.
If we hadn't had cages, we would have told you we were a complete loss.
Oh, that vetch did not work.
Yeah, but once you have the cages and you have something to relate it to at the end of the growth cycle, and you see all the different species in there and how tall they've gotten, and then you look out there and you see it's wiped out, and now you got weeds. Well,
Yeah,
it wouldn't cause all those weeds choked it out.
No.
Those weeds just covered the ground after the fact.
yeah. Well, and the flip side is with stuff they're not eating. What did I spend all that money planting something they didn't eat it? So it's good to know what they did and didn't eat, or like you said, the weeds choked it out issue. I mean, that's legitimate. Sometimes when the summer plantings, they will choke it out, and you wouldn't know that was legitimate or not without the cage.
So the cages you done, Mikey, were they with what? Metal T-post and like a 3x3 or 4x4?
Yeah, just
Fence
whatever
in?
we had. Some of them was just little rebar, and some of them I bought some fence posts from like the Tractor Supply, little cheap chicken fence posts, what I call
Right.
them. And you can do
Chicken
wood
wire.
stakes, and we did.
Tomato
Actually, I
stakes
bought
on them.
chicken wire, and it was so expensive. We wound up buying.
That plastic wire.
Well, it was a plastic wire we had
From
laying in
Memphis
the
and May,
shop from
yeah.
Memphis and May, and I put that. Me and Mark put that around two of them.
It
And
worked.
They worked. So
Yeah. I've seen people use that silk fence. I've seen people use all kinds of stuff, but materials are high right now. So that is fence posts and metal is pretty bad. But we used to just use the like the old dog.
The 2x4 dog pen wire kind
That's
of stuff.
it. The dog pen stuff, and then you don't have to have one. If it's something rigid like that, you only have to have one stake because we used to be lazy about driving the stakes. But it's just, and then you can zip tie and stuff like that. So, but just having a simple cage is really helpful. With something like the joint vetch is pretty funny to me too. You'll see that actually, well, it won't if they ate it all up, but if it blooms and all, it'll reseed, and you would have never known it reseeded. If you hadn't had the cages out and stuff.
But we did see that because we had a lot of young growth. We just thought it was putting, trying to recover. It seemed like that joint vetch seems like it recovered better than. But the beans, once they get the soybeans and the peas ate down, they're gone.
Yeah, it's not coming back.
But the vetch got so thick and there was constantly young growth underneath, it was almost like it was a little bit invasive.
Yeah, that's funny you
had
say
to
that. Well, it's funny you say that. I actually was thinking that I've seen some places, man, particularly in the Delta, where it almost moves out into the woods. You're like, wait a minute.
Well, I know I didn't.
It's but yeah, it'll be and it grows a little better in the shade too in some cases. So it can be. I don't want to say aggressive, but it can definitely.
We're gonna find out how
off.
aggressive we can make it next year.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess a lot of this that you discussed today and went over, a lot of what we're doing is if you got a place, got a couple 100 acres, and the soil's crap, that's the biggest thing, and it kind of what we discussed, like the deer herd or quality bucks or anything like that follows the soil in the long term, in the big picture.
Yeah. So yes and no. I've absolutely seen some huge deer come off of really junky dirt. If you look at when the 9/11 happened, and they shut down all the military bases that were hunting, Fort Bragg produced, and it's some of the worst dirt in the United States of America. They had some huge deer. Just because they couldn't. In Camp Shelby, and same story. In some of those cantonment areas, places where so sometimes it's people. It's our fault, right? We're keeping them knocked back, but at the same time. There is some truth to that. So if you've got poor dirt, the ways you can mitigate that are obviously habitat management, but then also managing at a lower density. So, a lot of people don't like to do that. They won't be able to see a bunch of deer. But if you got janky dirt, that is an option.
We got something new in Mississippi this year. The velvet season.
Velvet season.
Oh,
Velvet
yeah.
season.
How did that come about, man?
Well, Tennessee got one. I was making fun of Alabama earlier.
Yeah.
Alabama just doubles everything we say. But and that's funny. I'm sure Alabama will have a velvet season next year. But Tennessee had one, and some of our hunters said, "Why can't we have one?" And we said, "Ain't no reason."
They like mosquitoes more than I do.
Yeah. So
I figured it was some insurance companies lobbying.
No, well, it's buck only, so it wouldn't be. It's buck only, but the reality of it is, like, Tennessee's had it for a couple of years now, and I mean it's legitimate, like 100 deer killed on that weekend.
Yeah.
It's just a 2-day hunt, correct?
Just a 2-day.
Yeah, September 16th through 18th.
Man,
I
if
think.
I'd have known you were going to ask that,
I think
pulled it up.
I don't know.
This
No,
month.
it's
in September.
Oh, is it September?
I'm pretty sure that's right. The 16th through the 18th.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's like 2 weeks before regular bow season.
Really?
Yeah. September, and it's again. Some of the hunters came to the commission and said, "Hey, Tennessee's got this. Can we have it?" We said, "Yeah, we'll put it together." So two things to know about it. It is buck only. It is one buck, and it is state legal buck. So even if you got a youth hunting, it says on there it's got to be state legal for that. You can't use your Charlie buck or any of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's got to be the buck for that region, the antler criteria for that region. The other thing to note is it does require CWD sampling. So the one thing I would say is, man, about every taxidermist that we've got in not every, man, probably half of the taxidermists and a lot of the big ones are participating with CWD sampling. So all you got to do is take it to the taxidermist if you're going to get it mounted. We'll also have the drop-off freezers out by then in almost every county. I think we got 60-some freezers in 82 counties. So, anyway, that shouldn't be an impediment if you want to participate. I would imagine the impediment would be the 100-degree weather.
Yeah, that's what I'm
ticks.
thinking. And,
Mosquitoes and
hopefully
wasps.
you are trophy hunting if you're doing that, because I don't see anybody just out meat hunting these velvet bucks.
So what I think a lot of people wanted it for and all that is you get all these, like we were talking about, bachelor groups on camera.
Yeah.
And this is the time of year. That's the time of year where you absolutely set your watch by those bucks. They're pretty easy to pattern at that time of year in some way.
Well, Baz, I hate to say it, more than likely mine and Mark's dad's going to be out sweating September 16th.
I guarantee it.
Like mosquitoes.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it might be neat once, but personally, I did that one time, but I don't know that I would be a perpetual velvet hunter. But it does require, by the way, a $10 permit. In addition to your all game line.
And it is private land only.
Private land only, correct. Thank you.
Archery only, right?
Oh yes, archery. Only. Yeah.
Can't take the 28.
Well, before we get out here, John, you brought up the CWD thing. A lot of people, in Mississippi, from a biologist standpoint, y'all are wanting to see collections. You're wanting to see.
Yeah.
Tell us basically how we can go about that as hunters. What we need to do after we, harvested an animal to get a sample to you guys.
Sure. Well, if you're interested in testing for CWD, and I would recommend it, but I mean, everybody's voluntary in Mississippi. We do not have any mandatory sampling. All the other states around us do have a mandatory weekend at least, but we do not have a mandatory weekend, so we're relying on voluntary sampling. One of the easiest ways is we have a list on our website of participating taxidermists, and man, they have been great partners. I can't say enough good things about these taxidermists. You got Rob, we get samples from him. There's guys in Tate County, believe it or not, there's a ton of taxidermists in Tate County. It's pretty funny. But we get samples from those. If you ask when you take a buck, are you a participating taxidermist, or you can look on our website and you can ask them to save that sample for you, and they will. We actually are compensating taxidermists if they request it, $10 a sample. But another thing is we have public drop-off freezers. There's one at Love Volunteer Fire Department in Hernando. There's one we don't have one in Tate County, but we've got one at Sardis. So Tate's not a huge county, not too far of a drive there.
So what do you take? Just take the head?
Yeah, that's right. So the head with about 4 inches of neck. We'd prefer if you didn't head shoot them. I'm just going to go ahead and say, because we do have to get. So the piece that we need is actually the lymph nodes that are right up under the throat. We're on the radio or whatever, so I'm holding my throat, and can't see. But at the reality, it's the right below the jawbone. I guess that set of lymph nodes. So if you give us a couple of inches of neck, the freezer will have instructions when you get there. But if you save just 2 inches of neck, it's plenty. All we need is kind of a landmark or to make sure you don't cut the lymph nodes off when you cut the head off. But if it's a buck, we would encourage you to cut the antlers off, just like you always do. You can cut a wedge out of them and cut the antlers off like everybody's done on a buck they weren't going to mount. That doesn't affect the sample. So go ahead and cut that off. If you're on a WMA, do go ahead and pull or any place where they do DMAP, go ahead and pull one of the jawbones for your own purposes, we just need one of the jawbones, and then you can drop it in that freezer. And like I said, on the September hunt, you have until the end of that hunt, whatever. So that's the only mandatory sampling. The rest of it is just voluntary. And if you have any questions, you can go to our website, mdwfp.com/CWD, and it'll have all of that information. We also keep a dashboard up there where you can know how many positives we have. Right now, the most, if you're in Marshall, Benton, a lot of positives there. We had an additional, we had some new counties added to the zone this year because of positives in the immediate vicinity. So like Claiborne came in because Louisiana found a positive, and then Tishomingo came in because some of the Alabama and our Alcorn County positives were kind of close to Tishomingo County. But, that's
one of those things we're dealing with, right?
Yeah. It's like you were talking about the evolution of deer hunting. That's probably the disease, that wildlife health, not just CWD, but all aspects of wildlife health is going to be something that we're going to be looking at. So,
well, John, one of the things we do at the end of the podcast is we talk about what we've been cooking, recipes. Yeah. So I want to know your favorite recipe far as wild game. It ain't got to be deer.
Oh, I'll do deer. So I cook for I have a staff of 7 people, and I cook for them all the time. I'll give you my two favorite recipes.
Everybody's writing this down.
No, man, I love a venison pastrami. So like if you take so I've actually been able to do this with elk, but man, if you take the brisket of an elk, deer doesn't have enough brisket to do it, but the brisket of an elk and do a pastrami is really good. And then, or like the brisket, I like to cut up and make like a Colorado chili. So like you've got the chunks, and then on a deer, I'll do the one of the top rounds, like the big round group, and do that in a pastrami. Man, that's like, or a pickled meat.
Yeah,
man, that's really good. Like that's probably my favorite.
You do like
thing.
a 7-day brine on it to get it there.
So it just depends. Yeah, I would do definitely. You're using like Instacure or something like that for probably 7 days, but I've done it for 7 before, and you get the donut. It didn't go all the way to the middle, but it's still good. But usually it takes more like 10 days. It depends on how big that chunk is, and then I'll put pickling season or whatever else on there.
Put it on smoker. You cook it in the oven, or
if you do a pastrami, you got to put it on the smoker. But I'll do the see there. You trying to catch me?
Catch him off guard.
Trying to catch me? No, if you're gonna do a pastrami, you put it on smoker. But I've done it like a corned beef and done it in the crock pot, and it's good. Do it with cabbage or something like that. So that's those big whole pieces.
I've got to try that.
Man, all good till he said cabbage. That kind of threw it out for me.
No,
I'm out.
But 3 or 4 top rounds in the freezer right now.
Yeah, but no, and then the wild hog, I like to make Italian sausage. We were talking about that on the way in, and then making a lasagna with that. Like I did that for my guys the other day, and like just that it makes a pretty good lasagna. You'd be surprised. So,
man, this fishing game gig sounds pretty good. The more we talk.
But, all right, what do you guys got?
Mark, you did a little. You cooked.
Yeah.
What'd you do this week?
So I had a roast off a deer we had last year. Cut it up. I should have took my time, cut it a little bit more even, but I just kind of diced it up. Put in an old aluminum pot. Didn't put anything on it. No salt, no water, no nothing, and just let it start browning. And as it needed, of course, you cook a little water out, but as it needed, I just add a little bit of water, just enough to not really cover them, but almost cover them, and done that for about 6 hours. And
just kept cooking it down.
Cooking it down, add water. Cook it down, add water. And by that 6 hour, it had created its own gravy. I'm talking about a thick gravy. Added a little Parmesan cheese, a little heavy cream, put it over some noodles. It's pretty good.
Was it tender? It still had some consistency?
I think if I had to do it again, I would definitely cut it in smaller pieces, just because some of them did. Like some of them didn't get as tender as other. But it was fine. Emily definitely said that was probably one of the best deer dishes she's had.
You never had to season it.
Never seasoned it.
Just the flavored.
It had a salty taste.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was fine.
Wow.
I guess the Parmesan cheese probably had some salt in it, but
that's interesting.
Something different.
There. Yeah. I've never tried it.
I would cook it again.
Yeah. You ever cook the deer down that long, other than a crock pot?
Yeah, actually, crock pot. Yeah, we do a lot but we'll braise shoulders. Just the shoulder. My kids love that, and if you do it a long time, all that stuff, the little connective tissue
just dissolves.
It comes edible.
Yeah, I mean, it turns into a gravy.
It's got some season, some natural flavor in there.
It was good. I liked it a lot. I definitely want to try it again. Like I say, I wouldn't. Yeah. I hate to sacrifice a backstrap, but it had to be good.
Oh man, don't do a backstrap like that.
It would have to be good. Or I wonder if you could get some of that like side skirt, or
you might could
something like that.
Shoulders and that muscle Johnstone.
So when you do it,
would be great for it.
When you was talking about doing it, you leave it whole.
Well, I've done it two ways. I'll actually, so usually what I do is take the shoulders off, and then I'll take the big groups off, and grind. But the shanks and like the tough parts of the shoulder, I cut them up real little, and I freeze them in 1.5-pound bags or 3-pound bags, and that's our Sunday. You know what I mean? We'll do that with egg noodles, like you was talking about, and we'll do that in the crock pot though. Yeah. Do it all day, or put it in the night before, and then after church we'll have. My kids love that. They call it beef tips, which I don't have the heart to tell them, but at the same time, it's they love that. And then I've done a whole shoulder in a in a roasting pan in the oven for like forevermore. Just putting the braising liquid, just
keep doing it.
Yeah.
Hey, it'll fit in one of them aluminum pots.
Yeah. Oh, if you ain't got one of those pots,
I always forget the name.
Magnolite.
Yeah, Magnolite.
And I think it's like it's a right of being a Cajun. Like you get married, they give you one of those when you get your Cajun card. It's like,
they definitely
get your white boots and you get your Magnolite pot and you're ready to go.
Outstanding.
Well, John, look, man, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know they keep you running all over the state. Just for coming and sitting down with us, man, it means a lot. I think people are going to get a lot out of hearing what you got to say. And I know you gave out your address, but if anybody's interested in getting in touch with the biologists in the state of Mississippi, if you've got some land and you'd like to get some help or just have some questions for John, where can they get
sure.
you?
Go to our website, mdwfp.com/private lands, or you can call the office at 601-432-2199. And we can get you set.
That's great. Now, do y'all have any seminars coming up or anything we need to be at?
Well, so we do have CWD stuff going, but it's going to be one in Corinth and one in Vicksburg. The one in Corinth is the Monday after Labor Day, and I think the one in Vicksburg is the Monday before Labor Day Monday. So yeah, we do, but those are just specific to CWDs.
You're not going to answer any other questions if they got them about food?
No. I mean, surely if somebody has questions, we'll
I know how that goes because you get it off. But thanks for coming out, man. We really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody to tuning in with us this week, and we're definitely going to be back next week talking all our normal deer hunting, land management topics and stories and everything that goes with us. We appreciate y'all. Tyler, where can they find us?
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and we're on all of the listening platforms, Spotify, Amazon Music, all the fun.
That's right. Y'all tune in, check them out, and look out for the more content coming your way. We gone.
Oh, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Time to go start a fire.